Zero-based numbering, or index origin equals 0, is a way of numbering in which the initial element of a sequence is assigned the index 0, rather than the index 1 as is typical in everyday non-programming circumstances. Under zero-based numbering, the initial element is sometimes termed the zeroth element, rather than the first element. Zeroth is a coined ordinal number corresponding to the number 0. In some cases, an object or value that does not belong to a given sequence, but which could be naturally placed before its initial element, may be termed the zeroth element. There is not wide agreement regarding the correctness of using 0 as an ordinal, as it creates ambiguity for all subsequent elements of the sequence when lacking context. Numbering sequences starting at 0 is quite common in mathematics notation, in particular in combinatorics, though programming languages for mathematics usually index from 1. In computer science, array indices usually start at 0 in modern programming languages, so computer programmers might use zeroth in situations where others might use first, and so forth. In some mathematical contexts, zero-based numbering can be used without confusion. When ordinal forms have well-established meaning with an obvious candidate to come before first, for instance a zeroth derivative of a function is the function itself, obtained by differentiating 0 times. Such usage corresponds to naming an element not properly belonging to the sequence but preceding it. The zeroth derivative is not really a derivative at all. However, just as the first derivative precedes the second derivative, so also does the zeroth derivative precede the first derivative. Computer programming origin. The primary origin of using 0 in enumerating data or entities in computer programming lies in the available machine instructions, which allow to jump in the linear sequence of instructions, given a specified condition. This is a crucial necessity to implement branching in instruction sequences. The main available conditions were on 0 and on negative of the content in a specified register. One of the most frequently used instructions for implementing loops was of decrement and jump if 0. That is, any data structure worth enumerating was dealt with in loops and 0 was at hand to control these loops. All higher-level language loop control structures are based on these elementary machine instructions and would not suggest the use of 0 themselves to this extent. Martin Richards, creator of the BCPL language, designed arrays initiating at 0 as the natural position to start accessing the array contents in the language. Since the value of a point OP uses an address accesses the position P plus 0 in memory. Canadian systems analyst Mike Hoy asked Richards the reasons for choosing that convention. BCPL was first compiled for the IBM 7094. The language introduced no indirection lookups at runtime, so the indirection optimization provided by these arrays was used at compile time. The optimization was nevertheless important, as batch processes in the system could be interrupted at any time to calculate yacht handicapping for the president of IBM's racing yacht. E. Dijkstra later wrote a pertinent note why numbering should start at 0 in 1982, analyzing the possible designs of array indices by enclosing them in a chained inequality, combining sharp and standard inequalities to 4 possibilities, demonstrating that to his conviction zero-based arrays are best represented by non-overlapping index ranges, which start at 0, alluding to open, half-open and closed intervals as with the real numbers. Dijkstra's criteria for preferring this convention are in detail that it represents empty sequences in a more natural way than closed intervals, and that with half-open intervals of naturals, the length of a subsequence equals the upper minus the lower bound possible values for I, with A, B, I all naturals. Usage in programming languages. This usage follows from design choices embedded in many influential programming languages, including C, Java, and Lisp. In these 3, sequence types are indexed beginning with the 0 subscript. Particularly in C, where arrays are closely tied to pointer arithmetic, this makes for a simpler implementation. The subscript refers to an offset from the starting position of an array, so the first element has an offset of 0. Referencing memory by an address and an offset is represented directly in computer hardware on virtually all computer architectures. So this design detail in C makes compilation easier, at the cost of some human factors. In this context, using zeroth as an ordinal is not strictly correct, but a widespread habit in this profession. Other programming languages, such as Fortran or COBOL, have array subscripts starting with 1. Because they were meant as high-level programming languages, and as such they had to have a correspondence to the usual ordinal numbers. Some recent languages, such as Lua, have adopted the same convention for the same reason. 0 is the lowest unsigned integer value, one of the most fundamental types in programming and hardware design. In computer science, 0 is thus often used as the base case for many kinds of numerical recursion. Proofs and other sorts of mathematical reasoning in computer science often begin with 0. For these reasons, in computer science it is not unusual to number from 0 rather than 1. Hackers and computer scientists often like to call the first chapter of a publication Chapter 0, especially if it is of an introductory nature. One of the classic instances was in the first edition of K&R. In recent years this trait has also been observed among many pure mathematicians, where many constructions are defined to be numbered from 0. If an array is used to represent a cycle, it is convenient to obtain the index with a modulo function, which can result in 0. Numerical properties with 0-based numbering. A range can be expressed as the half-open interval 0n as opposed to the closed interval 1n. Empty ranges, which often occur in algorithms, are tricky to express with a closed interval without resorting to obtuse conventions like 1, 0. Because of this property, 0-based indexing potentially reduces off by 1 and fence-post errors. On the other hand, the repeat count n is calculated in advance, making the use of counting from 0 to n-1 less intuitive. Some authors prefer 1-based indexing as it corresponds more closely to how entities are indexed in other contexts. Another property of this convention is in the use of modular arithmetic as implemented in modern computers. Usually, the modulo function maps any integer modulo n to one of the numbers chapter 0, 1, 2, n-1, where n1. Because of this, many formulas in algorithms can be elegantly expressed in code using the modulo operation when array indices start at 0. Pointer operations can also be expressed more elegantly on a 0-based index due to the underlying address offset logic mentioned above. To illustrate, suppose A is the memory address of the first element of an array, and I is the index of the desired element. To compute the address of the desired element, if the index numbers count from 1, the desired address is computed by this expression, a plus s times where s is the size of each element. In contrast, if the index numbers count from 0, the expression becomes a plus s times I. This simpler expression is more efficient to compute at runtime in a simple context. Note, however, that a language wishing to index arrays from 1 could simply adopt the convention that every array address is represented by A equals A, S, that is, rather than using the address of the first array element. Such a language would use the address of an imaginary element located immediately before the first actual element. The indexing expression for a 1-based index would be the following: plus s times I. Hence, the efficiency benefit at runtime of 0-based indexing is not inherent, but is an artifact of the decision to represent an array with the address of its first element rather than the address of the imaginary element preceding the array. However, the address of that imaginary element located immediately before the first actual element of the array could very well be the address of some other item in memory not related to the array. This situation can lead to some confusion in terminology. In a zero-based indexing scheme, the first element is element number 0. Likewise, the 12th element is element number 11. Therefore, an analogy from the ordinal numbers to the quantity of objects numbered appears. The highest index of n objects will be n-1 and referred to the nth element. For this reason, the first element is often referred to as the 0th element to avoid confusion. Science. In mathematics, many sequences of numbers or of polynomials are indexed by non-negative integers. For example, the Bernoulli numbers and the Bell numbers. The Zeroth Law of Thermodynamics was formulated after the first, second, and third laws, but considered more fundamental, thus its name. In biology, an organism is said to have zero-order intentionality if it shows no intention of anything at all. This would include a situation where the organism's genetically predetermined phenotype results in a fitness benefit to itself, because it did not intend to express its genes. In the similar sense, a computer may be considered from this perspective a zero-order intentional entity as it does not intend to express the code of the programs it runs. In biological or medical experiments, initial measurements made before any experimental time has passed are said to be on the 0 day of the experiment. In genomics, both zero-based and one-based systems are used for genome coordinates. Patient 0 is the initial patient in the population sample of an epidemiological investigation. Other fields. In the realm of fiction, Isaac Asimov eventually added a zeroth law to his 3 laws of robotics, essentially making them 4 laws. The year 0 does not exist in the widely used Gregorian calendar or in its predecessor, the Julian calendar. Under those systems, the year 01 BC is followed by AD 1. However, there is a year 0 in astronomical year numbering and in ISO 8601 to 2004 as well as in all Buddhist and Hindu calendars. In many countries, the ground floor in buildings is considered as floor number 0 rather than as the first floor. The naming convention usually found in the United States of America. This makes a consistent set with underground floors marked with negative numbers. Notice that, for buildings with subterranean stories, this labeling scheme can be seen as asymmetric. The asymmetry is apparent when the building has the same number of stories both above and below the street's surface. It can be resolved by viewing the index as the number of flights of stairs which must be traversed to reach that floor from ground level. While the ordinal of 0 is rarely used outside communities closely connected to mathematics, physics, and computer science, there are a few instances in classical music. The composer Anton Bruckner regarded his early symphony in D minor to be unworthy of including in the canon of his works, and he wrote "gilt nicht" on the score and a circle with a crossbar, intending it to mean invalid. But posthumously, this work came to be known as Symphony No. 0 in D minor, even though it was actually written after Symphony No. 1 in C minor. There is an even earlier symphony in F minor of Bruckner's that is sometimes called No. 00. The Russian composer Alfred Schnittke also wrote a Symphony No. 0 in some universities, including Oxford and Cambridge. Week 0, or occasionally Naught Week, refers to the week before the first week of lectures in a term. In Australia, some universities refer to this as OR Week, which serves as a pun on Orientation Week. As a parallel, the introductory weeks at university educations in Sweden are generally called Nollning. The United States Air Force starts basic training each Wednesday, and the first week is considered to begin with the following Sunday. The 4 days before that Sunday are often referred to as 0 week. 24-hour clocks and the international standard ISO 8601 use 0 to denote the beginning of the day. In London, King's Cross, Uppsala, Youngnago, Edinburgh Haymarket, Stockport and Cardiff, the train stations have a platform 0. Robert Crumb's drawings for the first issue of Zap Comics were stolen, so he drew a whole new issue which was published as Issue 1. Later he re-inked his photocopies of the stolen artwork and published it as Issue 0. The ring road around Brussels is called R0. It was built after the ring road around Antwerp, but Brussels was deemed deserving of a more basic number. In Formula 1, when a defending world champion does not compete in the following season, the number 1 is not assigned to any driver, but one driver of the world champion team will carry the number 0, and the other, number 2. This did happen both in 1993 and 1994, with Damon Hill carrying the number 0 in both seasons, as defending champion Nigel Mansell quit after 1992. Defending champion Alain Prost quit after 1993. A chronological prequel of a series may be numbered as 0, such as Ring 0, Birthday or Zork 0. The Swiss Federal Railways numbers certain classes of rolling stock from 0, for example, Re 460,000 to 118.